You think you're in control, don't you? That your hustle means you're winning. But let me ask you this. Why does it still feel empty? Why does every accomplishment feel like a temporary bandage over something that still burns underneath? You wake up anxious, go to bed exhausted, and somewhere in between you pretend that everything's fine. But it's not, because deep down, you know you're not living with purpose. You're just reacting, performing, surviving. And the most brutal part, you've been so busy trying to look powerful that you've forgotten at how to actually be powerful. This isn't motivation. This is a wake-up call. Keep listening, because what you're about to hear will tear through everything you thought made you strong and reveal what actually does. You're not broken, you're not lazy, you're not weak, but something feels off, doesn't it? Like you're running on fumes, doing everything right on the outside, but quietly falling apart inside. You get things done, keep up appearances, even chase goals, but deep down, there's a constant ache, like you're drifting further from something you can't quite name. You're not exhausted from hard work, you're exhausted from misalignment. You've been pouring your energy into proving and performing, into keeping up and pushing forward without ever stopping to ask why. And that's what burns you out. Not the speed, but the absence of meaning behind the motion. Carl Jung once said the most terrifying thing is to accept yourself completely. And maybe that's why you've been avoiding the silence, because in it, you'd have to face what you've neglected. But that silence holds your power. Real strength doesn't come from control or performance. It comes from remembering who you are beneath all of it. You don't need to do more. You need to return to what matters. And when you do, everything changes. Not because the world shifts, but because you finally stop running from yourself. Let me ask you something real. If you're exhausted, what exactly are you fighting for? You think you're preparing for life, but life has already started. The decisions you make, the things you tolerate, the silence you keep, those are your moves, whether you're aware of them or not. The board is set, the pieces are moving, and here's the unsettling truth. You've been playing without even knowing the rules. You react, you adapt, you survive. But is any of it intentional, or are you just moving because that's what everyone else is doing? You were taught to chase things, status, approval, a carefully curated image, but not once were you shown how to pause and ask the most important question: why am I doing this? That question alone could change your life. But most people never ask it because they're too afraid of the answer. Because if you stop long enough to look at the game you're playing, you might realize you're not even playing your game. You're living someone else's version of success, carrying someone else's expectations, trapped in a performance you never auditioned for. Carl Jung believed that the greatest tragedy is not the loss of life, but the loss of self. And that's exactly what's at stake here. This isn't about winning, this is about waking up. Because if you don't take control of your role in the game, you'll always be a piece moved by someone else's hand. You won't even know you're losing until the game is already over. And by then it's too late. You keep fighting day after day like there's something worth protecting. But have you ever stopped to ask what that thing actually is? Most people haven't. They protect their reputation, their income, their image, but not their peace, not their integrity, not their soul. They build walls around things that can be taken, stolen, judged, and replaced. And they leave what's sacred wide open, unguarded, neglected, forgotten. You say you're working hard to build a future. You're building skyscrapers on cracked soil, chasing a vision, but the foundation underneath is crumbling. If your inner world is crumbling, what exactly are you building it on? So ask yourself, right now, what are you really protecting? What are you willing to fall for? And what are you willing to rise for? Because if you're not defending your emotional balance, your clarity, your purpose, then you're not defending anything real, you're just reacting. And reacting isn't strategy, it's survival. You weren't made to survive, you were made to move with meaning. But that only happens when you remember what's worth protecting and what's not. You've been taught to equate noise with power, that the louder you are, the more people notice. That constant motion, constant hustle, constant visibility somehow equals strength. But look closer, really look. Does shouting louder make you more certain? Does constant movement make you more grounded? Or are you just exhausting yourself trying to prove a version of strength that was never yours to begin with? Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't beg to be seen, it simply is. It's quiet, steady, unshaken. The ones who truly hold strength don't talk about it, they don't flex it for validation. They carry it in how they move, how they choose, how they pause. That silence you mistake for weakness. That's where wisdom lives, that's where clarity begins. Carl Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we'll call it fate. And that unconscious part of you, the one chasing approval, chasing momentum, chasing noise, it's what's keeping you from your center. You don't need to be everywhere. You don't need to respond to everything. You don't need to prove your worth through chaos. Because the king doesn't race across the board. He moves when it matters. Not because he's slow, but because he's sure. The world has enough noise. What it's missing is presence. And when you embody that, when your strength becomes stillness, you stop playing by the rules of those who are screaming to be seen, because you've already seen yourself. And that changes everything. You've been lied to, and the worst part is, you believed it. Not because you're naive, but because the lie was dressed up as love, success, ambition. Be productive or you're falling behind. Stay strong, don't show weakness. Earn your worth. These ideas were fed to you so early, so often, that they stopped sounding like lies. They started sounding like truth, but they're not. They're chains. Quiet, invisible chains that keep you moving, keep you performing, keep you pleasing, until you don't even know who you're doing it all for anymore. You measure your value in output. You link your dignity to achievements. You push past your limits, not because it feels right, but because it feels necessary. And every time you silence your exhaustion, every time you ignore that whisper that says, "This isn't it," you hand over another piece of your peace. And it adds up. Slowly, silently, it wears you down. You smile in public, but inside, something's fading, and you don't know how to get it back. Carl Jung believed that the greatest suffering comes from living a divided life, one where your outer self thrives while your inner self withers. And that's exactly what these lies do. They split you in half. You think you're being strong, but you're really being silent. You think you're being disciplined, but you're actually disappearing. You're putting on armor every day over a body that's bleeding inside. Real strength isn't found in pretending everything's fine. It's found in finally admitting what's not and choosing to stop performing long enough to actually live. There's a kind of power no one talks about. Not the kind that turns heads or demands attention, but the kind that stands still in chaos and doesn't flinch. It doesn't need to rush, prove, or explain itself because it's rooted in something deeper. This is the power of clarity, quiet, unshakable, and invisible to those too busy chasing momentum. Most people confuse noise for meaning, speed for progress. They run after more, hoping it'll finally make them feel whole. But clarity? It stops the chase. When you know who you are and what truly matters, you don't move out of fear, you move with intent. That kind of clarity becomes your anchor. You're no longer pulled in 100 directions or shaken by every setback. You stop needing approval because you're aligned with something stronger than praise: truth. Carl Jung said your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart, and from that place you stop reacting and start choosing. That stillness creates gravity. You don't need to shout to be heard. Your energy speaks first, and when you lead from that space, steady, unapologetic, clear, you no longer play the game to be seen. You become the one who changes the rules by simply refusing to move without purpose. You keep waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right sign to step into your power. But here's the hard truth. No one's coming to hand it to you. No one's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "What? You're ready now." Because leadership doesn't begin when others follow you. It begins the moment you decide to stop following your fear. The moment you stop letting your emotions drag you and instead start guiding them. The world loves to talk about leaders, the charismatic, the bold, the loud, but the kind of leadership that matters most, that starts inside, and most people never get there. You've been taught how to manage your calendar, your goals, your image, but who taught you how to manage your mind? Who showed you how to sit with your thoughts without running from them? How to hear the voice that doubts you and respond with clarity instead of collapse? That's where real leadership lives. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the journey of becoming whole, of integrating all parts of yourself so that nothing controls you from the shadows. That's not a quote for a journal, that's a challenge, a call. Because if you don't lead yourself, someone else will, your triggers will, your past will, the loudest voice in the room will, and you'll call it fate. But it's not fate, it's neglect. And the moment you realize that, that's when everything begins to change. That's when the king finally wakes up and remembers he was never just a piece, he was the center of the board all along. They'll praise you for staying in line. They'll cheer you on when you follow the rules, when you hit every milestone they set for you, when you meet their expectations without asking if they were ever yours to begin with. Society loves obedience. It rewards it with applause, promotions, likes, comfort. But here's what they don't tell you: obedience can feel like success while it slowly robs you of yourself. You can play by every rule and still lose the game if the rules were never written with your truth in mind. But clarity? Clarity is dangerous. It doesn't fit in boxes. It doesn't follow blindly. It questions, it challenges, it refuses to move just to be accepted. Clarity doesn't care about approval. It cares about alignment. And that's why people respect it even when they don't understand it. Carl Jung said that the most frightening thing is to accept yourself completely. But when you do, you become unshakable. You stop being easy to control. You stop being swayed by trends, by gossip, by noise. Because when you're clear, you don't need to convince anyone. You just move, and every step you take echoes louder than any shout. People will misunderstand you. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you arrogant, cold, difficult. Let them. Because they're not used to someone who isn't waiting for permission to be themselves. The world may reward obedience, but it quietly bows to those who walk in clarity. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you'll never trade it for applause again. Most of what you call decisions aren't really choices, they're reactions. You wake up and immediately respond to whatever's pulling at you. Emails, expectations, moods, memories. You go through your day trying to keep up, to fix, to control, to survive. But ask yourself, when was the last time you chose your direction rather than letting the day choose it for you? When was the last time your move came from intention instead of impulse? This isn't a small shift, it's everything, because a life built on reactions is a life that never becomes your own. And here's what makes it worse. You start to think this chaos is normal. That stress means you're doing something important. That burnout is the price of ambition. But it's not. It's the symptom of living on autopilot, of letting the world decide how you feel, what you chase, and what you settle for. Carl Jung warned that until we face what's happening inside us, we'll keep calling our reactions fate. But it's not fate. It's just the cost of not choosing. Every time you pause and ask, "Is this mine?" that's a step back into your power. Every time you say no to what drains you, even if it looks impressive on paper, that's leadership. You don't need to control everything. You just need to stop handing your life over to everything that tugs at your attention. Because the moment you stop reacting and start choosing, even in the smallest ways, you stop drifting and you start leading. You've spent so much time protecting your image, your reputation, your space, but have you ever protected your mind? Have you ever treated your inner world like sacred ground, something worth building, defending, and nurturing? Most people haven't. They build everything on the outside, careers, connections, calendars, hoping that someday the inside will catch up. But it doesn't work that way. Because if the inside is chaos, the outside eventually crumbles too. Peace isn't something you stumble upon, it's something you build, brick by brick, thought by thought, boundary by boundary. Carl Jung believed the psyche was like a house with many rooms, and most people only ever live in one. They don't explore, they don't clean out the shadows, they don't reinforce the foundation. And then they wonder why everything feels shaky, why the smallest storm shakes them. But the truth is, you can't control the weather. You can only strengthen the walls. Your inner castle is your mental clarity, your emotional balance, your core values. That's your fortress. That's what keeps you steady when the world goes loud. So ask yourself, what are you letting into your mind? What are you feeding your thoughts? Because whatever you plant, there will grow, noise or clarity, fear or focus. If you don't take care of your inner kingdom, no amount of success will feel safe, no amount of applause will make the anxiety stop. But when you build peace inside, you stop fearing the outside, and that is what makes you unshakable. It's like lighting a fire in the middle of a storm. The world can rage around you, but inside, it's warm, it's still, it's yours. There comes a moment, quiet, usually unnoticed, when your soul whispers, "Never again." Maybe it's after you've said yes to something that broke you. Maybe it's after you've stayed silent when everything inside you screamed to speak. Or maybe it's when you've finally had enough of shrinking, pleasing, proving. That moment is sacred. It's the line you draw in the sand. And from that point forward, something changes. You no longer move the same. You no longer give yourself away so easily, because now you know some things are just too expensive to lose twice. Carl Jung believed that self-awareness isn't just about knowing your strengths, it's about knowing your limits. Knowing what you can't afford to sacrifice anymore, your peace of mind, your sleep, your joy, your boundaries, your truth. These aren't luxuries, these are essentials. The kind of things you only learn to protect after you've felt what it's like to live without them. So what's yours? What's the one thing you'll never trade again? Not for attention, not for approval, not for comfort. If you don't decide that now, life will keep asking you to. It'll put you in situations that test what matters to you until you finally choose to protect it. And once you do, once you make that non-negotiable sacred, your path becomes clearer, your power sharper, your presence heavier, because people can feel it. They can feel when someone has something they won't sell, and that's when you stop being influenced. That's when you become unshakable. At some point, all the noise fades, the pressure, the expectations, the comparisons, they lose their grip. And what you're left with is one question: what do I truly want to protect? Not what impresses others, not what makes you look strong, but what makes you feel whole, because that's the final move, not some grand gesture or public win, but the quiet decision to live from your center, to stop moving just to keep up, to stop reacting just to survive, to finally say, this is what matters. This is what I won't betray. Carl Jung understood that real transformation happens not when we conquer the world, but when we face ourselves. When we stop running from our own reflection. And in that stillness we find power, not loud, not flashy, but rooted, grounded, clear. That's the kind of power that changes everything. Not because it controls others, but because it refuses to be controlled. You've spent so long trying to win at a game you never agreed to play. You've followed rules that left you empty, but now, right here, you get to make a different move. The one that doesn't just shift the board, but shifts you. And once you move from that place, from truth, from clarity, from intention, you're not playing to win anymore. You're playing to protect what's sacred. And that's the move that ends the game. Not with noise, but with freedom. Because when you finally remember who you are, the board doesn't own you anymore, you own yourself. Now here's your move, not for anyone else, just for you. You were never just another piece on the board, you were the one holding it all together. Protect your center, move with purpose, and never forget who you are. If this spoke to you, there's another video waiting that will take you even deeper. Watch it now, and thank you for being a part of Mosaic Mind.